Welcome back to our Now Pronounce Your Divorce. Today, we have a very special guest with us to talk about one of the things I think when people are going through divorce that they often forget, and that is the disposition of the largest asset they own, or the protection of the largest asset they own. We sometimes forget that houses, they contain a lot of equity, especially after the increase in home prices over the last several years. And we see that coincide with the low interest rates that people have locked in, and truly understanding that you need to work with somebody to help protect that, I think is something that's oftentimes overlooked. So can you introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me back again. I am Staci Williams with Staci Williams Real Estate and Property Management. I'm licensed here in Virginia and North Carolina, and I have been specializing with family attorney law, with estates and divorces over the past 6 or 7 years, because it's really important for attorneys and clients to work with somebody who's a neutral third party who actually knows how to get the job done, but also has the experience to navigate and have problem-solving skills and strategic thinking to think beyond of what's going to happen in a residential real estate transaction.
Yeah, and a lot of money there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we've seen come up more and more, and I think it's starting in more expensive areas, right? I used to see it all the time when I practiced in Northern Virginia, but we're starting to see it creep around the country, and that's where people are getting divorced but trying to stay in the same home. What problems or risks do you usually see show up first when they try to do that?
Well, I mean, every situation is going to be different. And that's why it's important to talk to somebody, talk it out first. But it depends on who's on the deed, who's on the mortgage. If someone is leaving and they're on the mortgage, they absolutely want to refinance, get your name off the mortgage, get your name off the deed. So yes, people are wanting to stay in property because they got it back during COVID when interest rates were so ridiculously low, but they now cannot afford it with the new interest rates and stuff like that. So that goes into refinancing. But it's really important to make those decisions and have them in writing before you get yourself caught up.
And I know for a lot of our watchers that they're military, so getting that VA back. So many times a military member will move out of the house, they'll leave a mortgage sitting there with the VA benefit on it. And I know it's not just a one benefit, I know it's a certain dollar amount. But being able to refinance, get your VA benefit back really helps the formula for moving on. Another issue we see, people stay in houses.
Mm-hmm.
The house goes into disrepair because nobody cares anymore, right? So you're sitting there, you're worried about your divorce. The last thing you want to do is caulk around a tub, and then there's a leak. So how do you work with people to figure out who pays for repairs, utilities, just basic upkeep?
Sure. So, and for a specific instance, if someone has already moved out of the property, you would really want to get almost like a pre-appraisal. You want to get a pre-home inspection, make sure you figure out what exactly is needed at the time, what the price of the house is worth at the time that you move out, so that if you do have to sell it down the road because the in-spouse is staying in the house, then they're responsible for other upkeep and stuff like that. So that's a good way to devise who is responsible for what. Repairs, if there's nothing in writing, I'm a big proponent of everything in writing. If there is nothing in writing, then it just kind of comes down to however the attorneys planned it out. It's 50-50, then everybody's caught up.
Yeah, I had a case one time where the husband moved out. He signed an agreement that he wouldn't come back to the house, and the wife, being vindictive, just let the house basically get infested in rats, refused to cut the yard. So the HOA was fining them. The city was fining them. The city was putting liens against the house. And they had this property that was 100% paid for that they lost money on when they sold. But we were able to go to the court to convince the judge that it was her fault, and she owed him a lot of money back.
Yes.
So it's important to pay attention to the upkeep on the house. And that's a fairly high conflict thing. Right? Like, I'm willing to let the house fall down just to punish my soon-to-be ex. How can you help? As a realtor, couples avoid the conflict situations especially when one person is carrying a larger financial burden, but both people are getting the benefit of that?
So, I mean, you have to be a very empathetic, but also stern realtor. You have to know what the job is and what the task is at hand, but also be empathetic of everybody's situation. I have heard so many stories on both sides, but I'm not a therapist. I'll listen, but at the same time, we have a job to get done. And so, yes, someone might be vindictive and stuff like that, but ultimately you just have to make them aware that it's going to cost everybody, including them, in the long run. So making them more aware, situationally aware of what they're doing is not only harming their person, but they're harming themselves with it.
Another thing, one of the presumptions that we are always fighting against is, hey, we separated, I can sell my house right now. And not unless both parties agree. But then we run into, hey, I want to sell my house way down the road later. Mm-hmm. How do you talk to people about those, what may have been a good assumption 5 years ago, but what may today be a bad assumption about waiting to sell your house?
That I am dealing with that at the moment. So I have a situation where people are staying. One person stayed in the house because they want to be in the school district. However, both are still on the deed, both are still on the mortgage, and it goes back to the out spouse has left and the in spouse kind of let the house go to disrepair and stuff like that. But it needs to be very clearly outlined in the separation paperwork. Like, you need to refinance at a certain amount of time, or this is what the pre-appraisal is going to be, and this is how much I get out of it at the time that I left the property. So some people stay together and stay on the mortgage stuff just for the benefit of the children. But if one person lets it go, then that should be on them, not both of them. So having that pre-inspection, that pre-appraisal, and an outline of refinancing, or this is what's going to happen.
And, you know, I have a friend that's a very good appraiser out of the Chicago area. And that's one of the things he does all the time. He helps people get appraisals and sets the price, because when somebody lives there, they may forget to caulk the bathtub where the kids are. And then you have a water problem. Or there's another issue that I always like to remind people of. There's tax implications for the spouse that moves out to later sell the house and get the proceeds from the sale of the house to not have all the write-offs they might think that they have. We unfortunately had a case like that where they moved out 20 years ago. Oh, wow. And this is in Northern Virginia. So 20 years of Northern Virginia prices going up, only for the other attorney to realize he had forgotten to write that provision in about his client getting the tax relief that you would get after not living in a house for 20 years. And they ended up having to go to trial and still lost. And so the husband ended up losing a lot. You know, before, everybody likes to sign stuff, right? I sign things all day long without looking. If you hand me something, I'm going to sign it. Part of it is because I like to fight people on whether or not it's my signature.
It's good.
But what do you advise people before they sign anything?
You have to have really strategic thinking is a huge importance. Like, you have to know what's going to happen. Like, if A happens, what's going to happen if A doesn't happen? You always need a backup plan and a timeline. A lot of people go through divorces and stuff, and one person might be sitting pretty in a house and have no incentive to move out of the property, but because they're not paying any bills. However, there's a financial strain, but there's no timeline put in place. Like, hey, if we don't sell the house in 30 days, we need to reduce it by a certain percentage, or we'll accept a property within a certain percentage of the list price and stuff like that. So having everything in writing, but you have to game plan it out. I'm a big advocate of making sure you have not only one plan in place, but what's going to happen if that plan does happen, and what's going to happen if that plan doesn't happen.
It is. You know, you need to know A, B, and C. Best laid plans always fail. So, you know, one of the things I saw people try all the time is, you know, they would hurry up and try to sell the house. And they have nothing written down. And the reason they're trying to sell the house is because if they get the equity out of the house, it changes all the formulas for their budgets moving forward. And then you don't have one person, like you said, sitting comfortable kind of on top of the mountain, king of the hill, while the other person's out there struggling to find, you know, a one-bedroom apartment to try to have the kids move out. Right. So what advice would you give somebody who's trying to sell their house before a separation agreement's signed?
My advice is always consult an attorney, because I'm not in the legal field. However, there needs to be some sort of consideration of an email or there has to be some sort of evidence of a written agreement, because if you don't have anything in writing, like, everything can blow up at any point in time. So, I mean, it really is laying out your plans. You can probably use an email that says, okay, well, this is what we agreed to. That's what the attorneys get involved for and stuff like that. But anything just in writing, a timeline is the biggest thing before even a separation agreement. If you can't come to any agreements on that, selling a house is going to be, you have to come to some sort of conclusion before that.
You do. I've had to talk to so many clients and potential clients. I say, pump the brakes, don't move out of the house. Don't sell the house. I've only had one person that's staying in the house worked, but their house was 23,000 square feet. So he stayed in the basement, which was a little bit over 8,000 square feet. And that's a pretty big basement. And so he had plenty of room, and it had its own access, and they had like a 7-car garage. So he was all right. We talked a little bit about when one spouse moves out, what, you know, do you see the problem is when one spouse moves out for years and still holds financial responsibility on the house?
So that's also that brings into your credit score. Also, if you're both on the mortgage and you're both on the deed, then if someone misses the payment, so if the outspouse moves out, but they're on the mortgage, okay, and this in-spouse decides they want to be vindictive and they want to miss a payment or something like that, just because they're financially responsible now for the payments doesn't mean that your credit score doesn't get completely shot if they miss a payment. So when you move out of the house, I mean, if you're not going to, I don't really know a lot of people that trust their spouse. That's the whole purpose of the divorce, I think, is that you need to have them refinance. It's so important. The number one thing is to get your name off that mortgage, because the second a payment is missed, whether it's intentional or not, your credit score goes way down the drain. And over the course of years, it could totally come to surprise you when you want to go and buy your own house. Now, if your name is on the deed, that person cannot sell a property without your signature. So that's where knowing what your pre-appraisal is or inspection is going to come in. So it's just really important for somebody to get their name off the mortgage.
Yeah, it is. And signing a quick claim deed does not get your name off the mortgage. I've had a lot of people come to me like, but I've got this deed. It's a quick claim. I'm like, well, you're dumb because you still owe the money.
Right.
But you can't go back in the house. People don't like being told it.
The only way that you can get your name off of a mortgage is somebody refinancing it. That's it.
And frequently what we find is that the spouse that stays in the house is generally the lower earning spouse. The higher earning spouse moves out and the lower earning spouse can't afford to refinance. And then now everybody sits there and doesn't know what to do.
Correct.
I was talking the other day at the Norfolk Portsmouth Bar Association to the DJ, actually, was telling me about his brother who had to do that, got put into a court order only for the now ex-wife to purposely pay the mortgage 15 days late every single time because it continues to screw with him and he can't buy his own house.
100%.
So I'm not laughing at that. That's a very vindictive person to also take their own credit.
Yep.
We talk about waiting to sell a house. We can see kind of market trends going in different directions, right? If anybody thinks they can read the market, they can't. But how do disagreements over pricing, timing, repairs typically show up when everything collides, right? You're mad because you're getting a divorce. Like I said, you probably don't like and trust the person. Maybe your kids are upset because they have to have 2 Christmases now. So how do you help people pull that aside and say, we need to think about this rationally?
I mean, again, everything is situational. So if it does have to do with kids, you have to really dial someone back in and have them understand, like, this is what needs to be done. If you want the most out of it, you have to really understand what their goals are and then kind of dial it back and change the scenario of it. You know, if their outcome is to have the most money, then you need to be like, okay, well, maybe you want to wait until the spring. Maybe you want to put this much money into repairs and stuff like that so that you can get the most dollars. If they need to get out ASAP, then you might have to price it accordingly to what the timing of the market is. Obviously, the fall and the winter are a little bit slower times. So it really is situational on what the outcome is, what the relationship is with the two people, and who else is involved, kids, things like that.
Yeah, I know we frequently see where a parent will be on a mortgage and you'll have, several people involved at the time of buying the house. Seemed like a great idea, but going through divorce, you're pulling in a lot of people.
Yes.
And you talked about selling the house. Is it better to try to sell a house vacant, or is it better to try to sell a house when somebody's still living there?
Ooh, that's a good one. So it really depends on the condition of the house. Obviously, if it's vacant, you can get a little bit more repairs in there. But I've run into situations where if somebody is living in the house, they don't want an open house. They don't want showing. So I have been the person as a listing agent who will also meet the buyer's agent there because they don't trust that their soon-to-be ex-spouse is allowing one of their friends into the house to damage something, to take something. So it depends on their situation, their trust, but I've been there for all showings for some properties. If the timing is okay, let's get everything out of the property. Let's do some repairs, maybe stage it a little bit. So ultimately, you don't want people fighting back and forth or being difficult with showings. So it's nice to have it staged. So if it's two people who get along, let's make it look super pretty and get some people in there. But some people don't trust people coming in.
Yeah,
so.
I don't trust anybody coming into my house. So I understand that. But about 8 years ago, when I first moved to this area, we were looking at a house, very beautiful house on a golf course. And as through a divorce, and they didn't want to let us in. Finally, they let us in, and whoever was living there left their 5 dogs out while the showing was happening, but apparently locked the dogs up for a very long time. So there was just excrement everywhere. Oh. And we didn't end up getting that house because it smelled very bad. But I was like, I think the other realtor was like, I don't think the person wants to move.
Right. And that comes with like what I was talking about earlier, like incentive. You know, I'm dealing with the situation where it's just one spouse. They both are not moving out because the working husband is paying every single bill, the mortgage, utilities, all of the stuff, as he has been for years. And the soon-to-be ex-wife, she doesn't have anywhere to go. Alimony starts after the sale of the house. She has zero incentive to make showings happen, to be nice to people, to make it look presentable for any offers to come in. And so that's where it comes into situational, where you need to have a timeline. You need to have everything written down ahead of time. This is how open houses are going to go. This is going to be an auto approve. This is what it's going to look like. And this is who's going to be there.
You know, and this is when people are kind of working together, even though it may not seem like it, right? They're trying to sell the house. The divorce is going on. One of the situations that we run into a lot, we get phone calls from people saying, look, I was divorced 10 years ago. I signed the separation agreement. The house is to be sold in 10 years. I want to sell it. What kind of misunderstandings do you see when somebody hasn't seen the house in 10 years, right? They've gotten divorced. They've moved on. Maybe they live in a different state. And they're like, hey, I want my money now.
So I just dealt with something like that, very similar in September. And she moved out about 15 years ago. Her name was still on the deed. Fortunately, it wasn't on the mortgage. So she wasn't her credit was fine. But she was under the assumption that the price of the house was a little bit higher because of the area and stuff like that. But she didn't know that it was in complete disarray, and I needed to sell it as is and get a cash investor in there and stuff like that. So the only way to prepare somebody for that is even for an attorney to say, hey, go get that home inspection, go get that pre-appraisal, because you deserve the money for the amount of times that you paid for the mortgage. So unfortunately, my opinion is a very professional opinion, but I can also bring in that home inspector and be like, I promise you that this is the age of the roof and these are the photos and stuff. But you have to be also very careful with photos, because you don't want the person who's in there, their personal property, shown to the other spouse. So showing the age of the roof, HVAC, that's all going to show the person who hasn't lived there in 20 years what the actual value is.
And you talk about using outside professionals, right? And the reason that I know attorneys use professionals is we're trying to build trust with the court, right? We're the neutral party. We're trying to build trust there. Is that kind of the same thing there? The professional, the inspector brings in a level of trust?
Absolutely. So I consider myself, I've been working with divorce attorneys for quite a while now, and we've done a few deals ourselves, but I look at myself as a tool in your toolbox. Like, I'm there to help make you guys have more transactions, more credible referrals and stuff. Just like a home inspector comes in, I have my opinion of the value, but he is another professional bringing his professional opinion. I can bring in a moisture and termite guy. I can bring in general contractors. So every tool in my toolbox is going to help make the educated decision purely based on facts, not what my feelings are. I have facts to back up everything that I talk about.
You know, when you're talking about situations like this, we're talking about people that are dealing with this asset, how much clarity around long-term occupancy, like, you know, everyone wants to say, okay, you stay here till the kids graduate high school. A lot of people say that, right? They want to give continuity for the children.
I mean, it really does depend on who is on the deed and who is on the mortgage. You know, I'd be more than willing to let my ex-spouse stay in a property just to have a stable place for my children if it didn't come down to affecting me and my credit and where I can take my children down the road. So you just need to know a game plan. And I'm going to circle always back to that. There always has to be strategic planning, thinking, game plans of where it's going to go. I mean, I don't know. No one has a crystal ball of what anything is going to look like. You might say, yeah, I want my kids here because it's a good school district. And then 5 years down the road, it's rezoned. And now it's not a good school district. So you might want to change that. So it's always pre-planning and pre-thinking and having it in writing.
I always say proper planning prevents poor property appraisals. So, yeah, how can attorneys and realtors work together from the start, right? Everything we're talking about is from the start, not from the end. Because at the end, it's too late. That's when you end up just paying attorneys a lot of money. So from the start, what can people do about it?
So from the start, I mean, working with somebody who has that as a specialty and niche like me, neutral third party, bringing in that experience. I've dealt with many divorce situations, many estates and things like that, where not only do I have the experience to give people the advice of what to do, but my brain is so wired to be like, okay, well, we have to think about what happens next. So being a resource for attorneys, just to spitball ideas out, like call me, email me, just say, hey, this is my situation. What do you suggest? There's not going to be a template. There's not going to be like, hey, we needed to go over this, this, and this. Every situation is going to be different, even just a minute detail. And so working with somebody who has that experience is going to make the attorneys come out better because they're going to know what they're talking about. They're going to have a game plan and it's going to be better for your client.
I remember one time I had a case. It was a very expensive house in DC. I mean, I think it was more than 8 figures. And we had parents that were going to do a nesting agreement. That's where one parent will stay there for a week. The other parent then moves out. The other one moves in. So the kids always stay in the same place. And we called a realtor just to see how that would work. And they gave a great advice of, hey, get an appraisal first. And what ended up happening is, as most of the cases, some of the cases, right, the dad was the one that always did repairs. The mom never did repairs. And so he would show up every week and he got tired of doing repairs. So he stopped doing it. And mom was so used to dad doing the repairs that she didn't think about that stuff.
Right.
And so he very much so ended up costing a lot of money before we caught it. I mean, I was representing dad before we caught it. And I convinced him like, hey, just do the repairs. And then but in his particular situation, unfortunately, the court looked at it more favorably for him to actually hire somebody, because then they both paid for it versus him just paying using his labor.
Keep the receipts.
Yeah, you have to keep the receipts. So if you could have the listeners take away one thing to protect themselves for their houses going through divorce, what would that be?
Have a course of action timeline. It's so important. Whether it's what you guys agree to at the same time, you have to know what you want and you have to know what you want today, tomorrow, next year, especially when there's kids involved. Just have that course of action. What's going to happen if we sell the house in 30 days? Where am I going to go? Or what's going to happen if it doesn't sell? There's always going to be a what if, and there's always going to be an A, a B, a C. So course of action, timeline, and have everything in writing. Just because you think that you're going to get 50-50 doesn't mean that what you think is going to happen. So if it's in writing, that's what needs to happen. The course of action also needs to be in writing because that is legally binding if it's in writing and signed.
So for our listeners that want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
You can find me at Staci Williams Real Estate, and it's Staci WilliamsRealEstate.com. All of my information's on there, email, phone number, and just reach out. I'm extremely open to just brainstorming any questions that you have.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. If you like this episode, please hit like or subscribe and join us each week. We take a deep dive into divorce issues that can impact your life as you try to move forward.